Good evening, everybody. My name is Dawn Numdu, and I'm your host for hashtag Gather to Grow here with Food from Zanzi on Twitter Spaces. And we're celebrating youth in agriculture. We're saying Halala Young Agripreneurs. We're going to be celebrating, talking about what they do in the agricultural sector. We're going to be talking about some of the challenges, but also some of the positive parts and also what the future looks like. I have a full house tonight, so I'm not going to do much talking now. I'm going to just introduce them. They'll tell us a little bit about themselves, what they do in agriculture. And I must say, I'm really excited because we have such a diverse group of speakers here tonight who'll be telling us all about their journeys in agriculture and what makes the sector so sexy. So I'm going to start with Thabiso. Thabiso, I see you first up here on my list. Thabiso is the founder and chief executive officer of the Agripol Group, and that's in Limpopo. Thabiso, tell us a bit about your journey in agriculture and more about your farming enterprise.
Thank you, Don. My name is Thabiso Polimayineja. I'm an animal scientist by profession. I'm also an extension technologist. I'm based in Zanin. I'm the founder at Agripol Group, which is an advisory and extension company that helps emerging and small-scale farmers with technical advice and information. With regards to my journey, I've lived agriculture my whole life. I started at a piggery where I was a unit supervisor. Then I went to the Agricultural Research Council before I started my own consulting firm called Agripol, and that is where I'm working at the moment.
Thank you so much, Thabiso. Next up, I have Annelia van Niekerk. Annelia van Niekerk is a Free State cattle farmer. Annelia, tell us a little bit about yourself. I think agriculture also runs through your veins, and you've grown up with it like Thabiso as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Dawn, and thank you for having me. I started farming when I was in high school, but I can say that I started farming when I was like 5 years old because I grew up on a farm and I grew up in a family that loves to farm, and all of them are farmers. It's in my blood. It's something that I enjoy, and it's something that I have a big passion for. I'm a cattle farmer here in the Eastern Free State. I started farming with Sussex stud in 2012, and since then it grew a lot. I also have a commercial herd of Sussex and Zimbra and Beefmaster cattle. And yes, I just have a big passion for farming and inspiring young farmers and inspiring also young people to start a career in agriculture.
Thanks so much, Annelia. It's great to have you with us. I'm moving over to Kulani. Kulani is the chief economist at Agrisa. Welcome to Gather to Grow, Kulani. Just a bit about yourself and your journey in agriculture.
Good evening, Don. Thank you very much. My name is Kulani Wakasuweya, the Chief Economist at Agrisa, an organization that focuses on the policy space to kind of advocate and lobby for a conducive environment that enables the farmers to be sustainable, to be profitable and efficient in the ways they farm in this particular regard. So my journey in agriculture takes quite a different turn versus my previous speakers, and I can just imagine those that are going to come online as well. I grew up in Soweto, and the first farm that I made was Animal Farm, which was the book that we read at school. However, through my experience and just my working life, I then got to be introduced to the sector a bit more and fell in love with it, have a passion for it, and through experience and working, I've then grown in the sector to be where I am today.
Thank you so much, Kulani, and that's so interesting. I'm always surprised by how people get into the sector and just fall in love with it. It's where they feel at home. I share that totally with you as well. And it's interesting that we have such a diverse group of speakers. I can't wait to get into tonight's questions, but I have a lot more to go through. Henry John is a plant scientist. Henry, just about yourself, where your journey started in agriculture and also just your passion for the sector. Where did it start?
Hi, everyone. So my journey started actually when I was very young. I grew up on a farm, and then from there on, my father was in the agricultural business and my family as well. So from a young age, I was exposed to agriculture and learned the importance of agriculture to the land and to the world. And from there on, I decided to go study plant breeding at the University of the Free State. Currently busy with my master's degree in resistance breeding. And as where I'm sitting now, the opportunity that the university and hard work has given myself, currently busy with an internship in Germany.
Thank you so much for joining us from Germany, Henry. It's absolutely amazing. That's what I love about Twitter Spaces. It doesn't matter where you're at, you can join and we can all engage. That's why I like this platform so much. Okay, next up, I have Yolokaze. Olakaze is a BSc Agriculture, Horticulture. She's been on the space before, sharing some of her knowledge, and she's back again. Yolo, thanks so much for being here. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Good evening, Don. I am Yolokaze Olakaze. I hold a BSc Agric degree from UFH. As many of the previous speakers have noted, My journey also started from a young age with agriculture. I am a daughter of a street vendor, so my mother sold oranges and apples, but I always wondered, in Pathawa there are no citrus trees around or anything, but how do we get oranges? Where do they grow? So I was curious enough to know about plant production that I pursued this degree in horticultural sciences.
Thank you so much, Yolo. And then we have Diana. Diana is actually Henry's colleague, also in plant science. Diana, a bit about yourself, where your journey started in agriculture, and just more about where your love comes from for it.
Hello, Dawn. I'm from KwaZulu-Natal, and the first thing you should think of when you think of KwaZulu-Natal is agriculture. As it is, I'm competing with some of my friends from Limpopo to see what we have agriculture-wise, which is better than they have in Limpopo, because Limpopo is also quite a rich province. Growing up in KwaZulu-Natal, I've been there my entire life, and my mother's from Swaziland, so KwaZulu-Natal, Swaziland, it's almost the same vegetation, same area. So it's just agriculture. That's one thing you're exposed in. That's one thing you know. And I wanted to know where the seeds come from, where the fertilizer comes from. So I decided, you know what? I like agriculture. I like being out in the field. I like everything to do with nature. Why not go behind the scenes and work as a scientist and produce for the people, for the plants, and just have an impact in a different manner than what you already used to. I work in the plant pathology lab under Dr. Minar Ontong. We're currently working on fusarium headlights, mycotoxins, to see the correlation between the disease and the mycotoxins, and also find ways on how we can improve and get more resistant cultivars in South Africa. We currently do not have FHB-resistant wheat cultivars.
Thank you so much for joining us, Diana. It's great to have you with us. Well, doing some research, I was trying to figure out where we can start and what we can talk about. But for the most part, I just want to kind of celebrate the industry, celebrate all of our speakers that are here, and just, hear from them about how they see the future of agriculture. So investing in commodities and agricultural products like beef and grains was identified as one of the top 7 types of investments for 2022. And I think it's no secret that it's definitely attracting more and more young South Africans. And I think some of the speakers spoke about why they chose agriculture. But I maybe just like to speak to them about where their passion comes from once again, and then just run through some of the areas that they think is really attractive for young people to get into. Let's start with our economist, speak about that specifically.
Thank you, Don. What we are noticing is definitely a shift in the agricultural sector. I think for the longest of times, the sector has been seen or viewed as the ugly duckling of sectors, given just the misinformation, misconception about what it entails. For many, the sector was just seen as being just on the ground and getting dirtier. But I think with information, we are then now in a space where now the sector is going through a sort of facelift, as I call it, and it's attracting, as you rightfully pointed out, young people. And what's beautiful about it is that it's not just one kind or caliber of young people, but it's people from different backgrounds. And I think this space, this platform tonight is also showing us this factor, I think that comes with the attraction that you have is that then you have a diversity of expertise, backgrounds, as well as ideas that grows the sector. In many of the engagements that I make, I always say that the agricultural sector is a low-hanging fruit in dealing with many of the social elements that we find ourselves in as a country, particularly unemployment. And I think with the young people that are coming in with adaptation and adoption of technology, we find ourselves then able to solve the challenges that we are facing as a modern day society through agriculture. So you also did note that some of the biggest commodities are grains as well as beef, as well as horticulture, just to represent all the speakers that are on the line. And that goes a very long way in ensuring that the sector is resilient, agile, but also wholesome and competitive in a global scale by ensuring that we cover all bases and making sure that at the end of the day, there's also food security that is secured for the country itself.
Thank you so much, Kulani, and I think you make very valid points there, and I'm hoping to also talk about the aspects of what role do young agriculturists, farmers, and others in the sector play when it comes to, adaptation of technology and the advances in that regard as well. Tabo says that he's actually struggling to hear me. Hi, Tabo. There we go. I hear you now.
Good evening to everyone, and thank you to be on this platform, Dawn. Back to your question about the youth and the involvement with technology. As I said before, contrary to popular belief, the fourth industrial revolution is here to aid farmers to work more efficiently. And it's not here to make the workforce more redundant or stagnant. Most of the equipment that is used today is digitalized and works based on apps on cell phones, which makes it more efficiently to work on farms. I take center pivots, for example, when working with maize. They can be easily monitored on apps on the phone. And I'd also refer to drones, which are also used by farmers to get an overview of the whole farm without having to waste fuel on the field. And considering the current state of the fuel prices in our country, which also assists a lot. So I believe technology is here to assist us and has longevity in the industry.
Thanks so much, Tabo. Very valid point that you're making. Just to touch on again what Kulani was saying about how the sector is perceived, because despite what contributed, agriculture sometimes does carry this very strong negative stigmas around it. In some regions, agriculture is seen as being for the poor, for elderly people, on the land, hard work, or maybe even the opposite end, that it's more for wealthier people, that you need to have a lot of money to start up. Do our speakers agree with us? Analia, what do you think? You come from generations of farmers. Is it only for people who have more money? What is your take on that?
There's certainly a stigma surrounding farming, that it's just in other areas for people just growing food for their daily. It's their only income maybe that they get, and they're just producing for their own household. And then on the other side, you have the stigma that surrounds that, agriculture is for rich people. And I think that needs to change. I agree there is the stigma, but I think it definitely needs to change. Agriculture is a very, very, it's hard work. It takes determination. It's something that you're born with. It's a passion that you have. When people think, that agriculture is just for people that with a lot of money and everything, I think it's because there's a lot of capital that needs to go into farming, and there's a lot of money that needs to be put into farming and farming production. So I think that is why people think that, but it's not always the case. It takes a lot of hard work to make a success of your farm. Just my opinion.
Thanks, Analia. Tawiso, you're obviously an animal scientist, but you also run your consulting company and you support other farmers. What are people saying on the ground? What is the experience of yourself in the sector, but also others starting out, especially if you're a new farmer? Because it does cost money to operate any business, and farming in itself is a business as well. So what do you think about that, Tawiso?
I'm echoing exactly what my colleagues are saying, to say, look at young people, for instance. These are the future. And, they account for a large percentage of the rural population. And you find that the unemployment rate is very high. And if you check, there's a labor need in agriculture. So majority of our youth are facing hurdles in trying to earn a livelihood. So they actually try to migrate to these big cities, trying to find jobs and all that. Or else they can just focus on agriculture, because there's a lot of opportunities that are there in agriculture. It's quite challenging, but I'm happy with the way things are moving. Looking at young farmers pushing hard, even on the media space, trying to encourage people, and this kind of platforms established by Food from Zanzibar. I think we're heading somewhere. I think that the future looks great.
Thanks. I think I agree with that totally. And I think also just in terms of the agricultural media space, featuring farmers like you, it's exactly what we love to do and what we continue to do, specifically because it is changing. There is this new face of the agricultural sector, and it's looking very attractive. Tabo, I see you unmuting your mic. Do you want to add something to that?
I totally agree with what Tawiso just said. I believe the responsibility lies with us as the youth in our country, especially us who studied agriculture and have experience in agriculture, to bring solutions for sustainable growth, to increase our food baskets and combat food security. I mean, as Tawiso said, we don't need workers. We need innovation and visionaries who will bring forth solutions and hence alleviate poverty.
Thanks, Tabo. Let's focus a bit more on what Analia was talking about in terms of it is a risky business and it is a lot of hard work, because it is not as easy as people make it out to be.
No, definitely. It's a lot of hard work, because, I always make a reference to social media, right? Because it's a platform that we're using as the youth. I always tell people who are interested in joining agriculture that don't be smitten by what we post and don't be captured by the nature post. It's a lot of hard, back-breaking work, and we work long hours in a day. I always tell people, farmers don't have a normal 7 to 5 or 9 to 5 job. We work until the job is done, so that's one thing they need to understand. It's definitely a challenging industry, but I believe with proper planning, everything is converted there. And I always make reference to 7 Ps. Proper prior planning prevents poor pathetic performance. So I believe if we can be grounded in firstly learning about what we are doing, because that's the first thing we need to do. We need to understand what it is you're doing. So if you're in cattle, understand what's required of you to make a success of your business. So get knowledge, get someone who's going to help you, and then pave your way to success.
Thank you so much, Tabo. I think we might list that 7 Ps at the end of the session, definitely. Maybe we can get just in terms of sometimes people are deterred by, struggling to find financial investment, accessing land and other resources. That is the reality. We're not going to deny it. We're not going to say it's all rosy. Let's hear from Kulani. Kulani, what would you say in terms of navigating that part of the agricultural landscape? Understanding that this is where you need to find investment. This is what you need to be looking at in terms of the agricultural economy and where it's moving towards. Because it's easy to say, yes, I want to do it, but the realities are completely different. Kulani, and then I would definitely also like to hear what Henry and Diana thinks about it. So, but first over to you, Kulani.
I will be honest to say that when you look at the South African agricultural sector in relation to our international competitors, our sector receives little to no direct government support. But that's not to say that there aren't programs in place. There are a number of programs. But the challenge that then comes about is that all of these particular interventions are quite disjointed and scattered all over the show, which makes it a bit difficult to kind of have a coordinated kind of approach in ensuring that the sector remains viable going forward. But again, going back to the theme of just the facelift that is happening to the agricultural sector, in the space that I'll speak from the space that I operate in, which is the policy work where we engage with the relevant stakeholders from government to financing houses, etc. One thing that I have noticed is that there's a change of posture from these particular stakeholders. For one, government is sitting up and listening to what the sector has to provide. And I think the sector has proven itself to be quite worthwhile in the economy. And I think during the pandemic, it proved even further that the sector is a key sector in the broader economy. So what we're then noticing is that the government itself is trying to gather itself and organize itself in a manner that allows that the policy environment is conducive, not only for the farmers that are already in the system, but even those that are coming into the system, particularly those that were previously disadvantaged and those that were small and are moving into the commercial space. But also from a financing side of things, when you then speak to the banks and the financing houses, what you then notice is that they're starting to understand the dynamics that the sector brings onto the table, because the funding that is required for the sector is quite different from what you would find in any other normal business. In this sector, you need patient financing because, as you will know, with certain commodities, you may plant today, but you might not necessarily start yielding the next year or the next day. You'll start yield in the next couple of years. So what happens in the interim, you'll need more financing in order for you to do the farming activity that ensures that you actually have a good yield from the first time that you do start harvesting in this particular regard. The financing houses themselves are also posturing themselves in a manner that they understand the dynamics thereof. So they're creating products that are suited and are specialized for agriculture to allow for the sector to be in a good state going forward. And I think this is very key going into the future, again, because the sector is now positioning itself quite central to many conversations around solving many of the issues that we're facing as a country. And with that, we then also finding that the powers that be are also in a place of acknowledging and appreciating what the sector has to offer. Therefore, they then also bring to the table certain interventions that happen. As to what the programs may be, we'd spend the whole evening trying to list those. And I think even some of the colleagues that are speaking who are experienced in starting up and who have been in the farming business for generations or through the generations in their families will tell you just some of the challenges that they've also faced and what the kind of challenges they still face in trying to getting this kind of support, whether it's coming from government, whether it's coming from private sector or even international bodies in this particular regard.
Thanks, Kulani. That was exactly what I was trying to say, that it's a lot of hard work for very little financial reward. Like, it won't happen in the first 5 years. It might not even happen in the first 10 years. And I think between Henry and Diana working in the science space, they might be working on something now that will only really make any changes in years' time. But that's a very important aspect to think about, that you're not doing it for yourself and for now. Henry, do you agree with that? Diana, what do you guys think?
I definitely agree with that, especially talking from behind the scenes. I've been listening to everybody's responses, and to think of it that the work that we do in the labs and in the fields, all the research and technology that we are trying to develop is the benefit for the farmer and to make it easier for the farmer. It's like most of the listeners said, farming is a business. You have to think of it as a business because it's your life. And if we as science can improve that livelihood, that's why I have a passion for it, because from my point of view, I'm working with technology. Like Thabo said, the farmer can download an app, send a drone. We can analyze your fields with literally just a drone. And then you have your data, and you have to think about all these things, especially in today's times. And I believe that technology is definitely the key. And we also have to remember that it's our generation. We are a new generation, we are a young generation, and we are here to innovate, and we have passion in that innovation.
Thanks so much, Henry. Diana, you can go, yes.
Just to add a bit, farming is a means of life, and investing for a future might be problematic because you farm so you can afford your daily needs. So that's where an issue comes in when you have to invest for a future, especially for young farmers. They don't have that much room to invest for the future. So they farm now to gain profits, and the period in which they have to wait might be problematic. That's why most businesses might not be doing as well as they want them to do. And it requires practical experience, as it has been mentioned, which needs a lot of work to be put in place. You need to study. Even if you just want to start a pure vegetable farm, there is certain knowledge you need to add to that. It's not as easy as people think it is. And also to add on your previous question, which I did get to answer, why I decided to work behind the scenes, what led me to think of science. You see things such as herbicides, which most farmers are now using. Before, the main solution was plowing. But the thing is, with plowing in places with high rainfall and continuous irrigation, the weeds will just grow back. So herbicides are the solution, but it then gets you thinking, where are they coming from? And they differ depending on the type of plant you want to get rid of. Let's say, for instance, you have a sugarcane farm. You cannot use herbicides which will kill grasses. So you mostly attack weeds which are broadleaf. So that's all experience. And with fertilizer as means of plant food, you can plant your crop, but with no proper fertilizer, you might not get the harvest you're looking for. So there's a lot of things coming into play in a farm which are just expensive, and you have no idea how they came about. And it's really interesting. And you see seeds coated in paints for preserving them and also making them more viable when you plant them. Those are all that contributed to going into the science field, being a plant scientist.
Thank you so much, Diana. I think when it comes to plant science, I can keep you on this call for the next 2 hours and you'll be able to entertain us. So I definitely think there's room to create another space where we can just talk about your career and Henry's career in the science aspect as well, what the landscape looks like for young people in agriculture and celebrating that, investing in activities that support agricultural production, capacity building goods and services, there's logistics and other value addition services, service providers, are avenues that young agriculturalists can be exploring. Is this definitely the future for agripreneurs in this space? I mean, we have a group of amazing people listening as well. I'm seeing some of the people that I've interacted with before. Is this definitely the future? Analia, what do you think?
It's definitely the future. I think more and more opportunities are there for young people in agriculture, more and more opportunities for them to be part of. There's a lot of companies that provide support to young farmers and to young people that are in agriculture. There's more and more places where young people who wants to get into agriculture, where they can get the necessary support, where they can get the necessary education and training. And it makes me so happy to see that more and more opportunities are created for young people in South Africa who wants to follow a career in agriculture, that have a dream to be part of agriculture in any form and in any way. There are opportunities that are being created for them to be part of it. It is tough. I see it. It is a problem that, when you're finished maybe with your diploma in agriculture, or you finished studying, where do you go from there? Where do you get work? Where do you get experience? And it's tough to get those opportunities and to get into certain places. But I believe more and more people are getting used to the idea of young South Africans who wants to get into farming, that wants to come and do internships with them and gain experience. So more people just need to get used to the idea. I think it's kind of like a new thing for the agriculture sector, to get used to people that needs to gain more experience. When we look at the past, people gained entry into agriculture was like farmers whose sons wants to farm. That was it. And now more and more people that never had the experience of farming wants to gain into the agriculture sector. And there needs to be opportunities that needs to be created for them to get that practicals in and to get that experience in. And I think it is changing, and I think definitely that the opportunities are there. It's still something that needs to grow. It's something that needs to be promoted. I believe, among fellow farmers, among fellow people in the agriculture sector.
Thanks, Anali. I think you make a very valid point in terms of the type of opportunities that are available and also just getting that first level of experience. I know that that is a struggle for many people who are graduating. Just getting your foot in the door is sometimes a struggle. Yolo, you spoke to me, separately just about consulting in your field and in your space. How difficult is that? But it is definitely also an avenue to look at once you have an experience to offer your talent or what you've learned to other farmers, specifically as an agronomist.
I have quite a lot of experience in asking the why are my plants dying question. Starting out learning, people in my village know that I'm studying an agriculture-related profession. Whenever I went back home, people would ask, why are my plants dying? Why are they turning yellow? In the quest to try and answer that question, instead of saying, I don't know, I kind of looked for opportunities. Internships aren't really easy to find, so when I struggled with finding internships and all, I started volunteering at local nursery, like near my school, UFH. So to kind of equip myself with skills and better understand the horticultural science that I'm saying I'm studying, because I could not really get it saying I am a horticultural scientist, but I can't grow seedlings. So I went to those type of places like the nursery and also the skills development club to kind of develop myself as a horticulturist so that I'll be able to help people who are starting out. Currently trying out a consultation business. What my aims are with this consultation business, much of the youth is getting involved in the agricultural sector, but there aren't many people who are willing to answer the how question. What must I grow? Where must I grow it? Is this soil right for potatoes? So I'm trying to answer that question, upcoming agripreneurs, and also to kind of open their minds to diversifying horticultural crops. We know that everyone can grow cabbage, but why don't we try Brussels sprouts? Why aren't we growing microgreens? Why aren't we trying out mushrooms? So I'm kind of in that journey. And besides passion and the quest to be part of the solution when it comes to food security, I'm more focused on research and development because it's at the heart of our sector and it is what impacts change.
Thanks, Yolo. And I want to say amen to diversification and looking at other crops. I mean, we've done spaces on microgreens, dragon fruit. Asparagus is one of those crops that commercially it's not really being grown anymore, and farmers aren't really looking at that. So I'm all for looking at what are the alternatives and what are those niche crops. I share that sentiment as well, along with the, working in the development and research space. Henry, I see you've unmuted your mic. Did you want to add something?
I've just been listening to the past two speakers talking about the opportunities, but I just want to add to that as well. The companies, especially the agricultural companies, are seeing that open niche. They are seeing that young people are more innovative, they are more eager to work. So they will give you that opportunity, but that opportunity is not just going to come by itself. They're not going to put it out there. You need to also put yourself out there. From my personal experience, the only reason I have this internship in Germany is because I emailed every single company that there is about the opportunity, and only one came back to me. So from my point of view is you need to put yourself out there. You need to put in the work to reap the reward. But that is one thing that the companies are seeing. They are seeing that we need to pull in more younger people into this community that are eager to work, and the opportunities are only going to become greater, especially if you're up and coming first year, second year. You need to put yourself out there, vacation work, because as soon as you walk out of university, they expect you to have already 5 years experience. How do you do that? You need to put yourself out there, go work vacation jobs, send them emails, go out there and gain the experience yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you.
Totally, I agree with you. I see Kulani wants to add, and then Tabo's also unmuted. Kulani, over to you.
Yeah, I think I want to echo what Henry just said, that the youth also needs to be proactive in this particular venture. We are living in a modern society where things have changed drastically from what they used to be. And modern day solutions require modern day kind of individuals. And those individuals are the youth. One thing I always say, and I think this is quite important in the South African context, is that if you want to create a African pie or a South African pie, you need South African ingredients in a South African kitchen. So we need the youth that understand the landscape and are able to posture accordingly and ensure that the solutions are tailored for what we want to do.
I totally love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tabo, you wanted to add something?
I agree with what all the speakers said, but I just wanted to also mention the journey that I took as well, which might be encouraging to some aspiring farmers. I started working during the holidays, as Henry had mentioned. Starting from my second year, during my school holidays, every holiday, I used to go out there and I worked on various farms until today. So I'd go there, and some farms I worked for free. And I didn't mind that because ultimately what I wanted was experience, which I on the pursuit of getting now and bettering every single time. So the message I have for the youth and people aspiring to be farmers is to do something and be busy. Opportunity dances with people already on the dance floor. So you need to be busy in order for you to get something prominent for your life.
Thanks so much, Tabo. I see we have one of our listeners who'd like to contribute. Elvis, the floor is yours. If you'd like to say anything, contribute to the conversation, or maybe have a question for our speakers here tonight, you can unmute your mic.
Just to give you my background, I went to an agricultural high school, and I understand very well the food security element and why it's important. And I've invested in a poultry farm and a crop production in Limpopo. The element of me going to agriculture, I went in there thinking, well, okay, fine, it's a great business, so we'll make sure that we turn it around quite quick. And one of the biggest challenges I've gotten to realize is that a lot of businesses in agriculture and agro-processing are actually not supportive ready, or they're not funding ready. And this is because they do not understand or know of the information that they need to be, or different things that they need to ensure that they are supportive ready. Because when you go to a provincial agricultural department, they'll tell you about you wanting this and this and this. And when you go to national, it's a completely different story. So the national and the provincial have actually different focus in the type of agricultural SMEs that they actually support. You find that the provincials only focus on subsistence farmers, while national focus on commercial and high growth farmers. And also the programs that are there, yes, someone mentioned earlier that they are literally scattered everywhere. They're not necessarily well organized. You realize that even though they are well scattered, a lot of SMEs, when they apply, they're not able to get it because they're not yet ready to access those opportunities. So from your side, my question is that what are the steps that are actually being taken to actually educate SMEs about their needs and what they need to be doing to be ready for those kind of opportunities, but also bringing on the different institutions that actually support agricultural businesses, whether it be on training and development, whether it be on fertilizer supplying, whether it be on direct funding from the different private sectors. Are we also looking at ensuring that we bring in those players and stakeholders to ensure that they unpack what is needed from the agricultural SMEs for them to be able to grow faster? Because I know and understand agriculture is very expensive. We thought that we're just going to put money in and things are going to happen. But it's a constant investment in ensuring that you grow the business. And there's always risks that comes across, especially when you talk about pesticide, where you have to do for the crops or whether the livestock. We get to go into farming with our blindfolded without actually having more of a mentor, more of a guider to ensure that we get things right. So how are we ensuring that all of those things happen for the SMEs? So that was just my question.
Thanks, Elvis. I think on this space specifically on Gather to Grow, we've tried over the past few months to definitely bring like-minded individuals into it, but also find the solutions to what you're specifically alluding to, bringing experts in to talk about financial advice and how to invest, speaking about the various commodities and how you can get into it, finding people who have the expertise and the experience to specifically talk about that. But I think there is a big possibility, and I should maybe as another session talk about what you're specifically focusing on finding out, are these agricultural businesses ready for the uptake of this new wave? Kulani was talking about this new generation of farmers that are really eager to learn and want to find placement and want the experience and need the funding and need that support network. I think that's a very important point that you're making, and I'll definitely invite you to another space where we're going to be talking about that specifically, because I think when we were talking about the agricultural agro-processing master plan, another participant was saying that there aren't opportunities available, and I had committed to also getting companies like HoldGrow, getting the agri-essays, getting the companies that working in the fruit sector, and to speak to them to say, list the opportunities that are available and how you will take in all these graduates that are ready and eager to learn. Tabiso, your hand went right up as soon as Elvis finished speaking, so the floor is yours to contribute, and I'd like to open it up to all of our other speakers as well.
Just to allude more on what Elvis was saying, what he just touched there, it's very important, because for me personally, to start Agripol Group, I saw a gap there to say, okay, here is a small-scale farmer or a passionate farmer who want to start small in a backyard, maybe with 100 broilers, and that farmer has no technical knowledge. Me and my colleagues, we then came up with an idea as agricultural graduates to form Agripol Group. So at Agripol Group, we focus on the technical aspects of livestock and crop farming. So we do this virtually. It's free of charge. So what we actually do is we bring the technical side of things, because agriculture is very technical. And I'm actually happy that Henry is in Germany, because the workshop that I'm attending now, we have University of Göttingen here bringing an innovation. So just to be broad, this one is for you, Don. We need to come up with a space where we invite these stakeholders that add value to small-scale farmers, direct value, either technical, either finance, either marketing. We make it big, and we actually invite all farmers into the space. I don't know.
I agree with you totally. I think that is a good way to start. And I think that can even be a series where we look at the different aspects of it. I've taken up this point, and I'll definitely make it a space that we can have for the future. Anyone else like to comment on what Elvis was alluding to? And then I think I'd just like to ask 2 more questions from my side. Henry, you've unmuted. Do you want to add something?
Just like to add my point of view from the science aspect of that question. Yes, I can't give my opinion about the investments and the business side of this, but I can give my opinion on the science side of this. There's a movement called precision farming. So what we as scientists and the companies that provide the seed and everything, we are trying to get more out of 1 hectare. Let's say a farmer is planting only 100 hectares, or you only have a farm that's 100 hectares. We are thinking of, listen, how can we improve this crop so it can adapt to the environment better? And how can this farmer get more out of just this 100 hectares that he's planting? Especially, we're not just thinking about the farmer, but we were thinking about the population. Because as you guys know, the environment, it's changing. It's more difficult to plant. It's less rain, more heat. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to precision that in a way of, listen, how can we improve this cultivar so that the farmer can get more out of his land and more into his pocket to contribute to society, because population is unfortunately growing. And this is the way, from a science point of view, how we think about it is how can we help you from a different point of view.
Thanks, Henry. And then I'd maybe just like to add that Elvis, a question that was on my list was specifically around the startup funds, accessing internships and practical experience, the labor problems that often farmers and agriculturists face. These are some of the challenges besides accessing agricultural finance within the agricultural sector, going to banks, getting land. There's so many issues. Maybe like to just get one solution. Henry just spoke about, what they're doing in the science world. But what are some of the other solutions that we should be thinking about? I'm going to put you on the spot again, Kulani.
There are quite a few solutions. And I did say earlier on that the challenge that comes with them is that they're quite disjointed. Let me just speak maybe of one that is run by Agrisa through our subsidiary called Agrisa Enterprises. And the focus thereof is to build the farmer of tomorrow. And what that entails is that it entails not just the funding to enable the actual farming or the research to happen, but also to have a mentorship leg that is also attached to that. And I think one of the speakers, I think it's Elvis, who mentioned that some of the businesses are not funding ready per se. This is a very pertinent point that he raises. And I think through such interventions by Agrisa Enterprises, you are then building up the startup all the way to being a commercial farmer. And through the programs, Agrisa Enterprises and the programs that they have in place thereof, the focus is to build the farmer of tomorrow from ground up, excuse the pun on that. So there are a few, I know with government as well, there's also a few that are sitting under the ambit, but unfortunately, from time to time, you then hear that it doesn't filter down to the ground, to the people who actually need it. That's a conversation to be had on a different day without becoming too political about the conversation. But there are those kind of funding. The challenge that you will always have when you go approach a more formalized institution like a bank, for example, is that they also have their own funding. I think they call them covenants in terms of what is it they require before they start funding you. And the challenge with that is that sometimes it becomes a bit untenable for the starter in the sector. So what then happens to that particular farmer? And I think it's quite important that you do not leave anyone to let anyone fall off the wagon by focusing on just the established or the more bigger agri-businesses. It's pertinent that we also focus on the small guy who's starting out tomorrow and seeing what the roadmap is for them. How do we equip them to go forward and ensure that 5 years from now, they're winning off from a support program into being self-sustainable, and ensuring that they are able to operate away from these kind of interventions. So I think the premise of it all is that the efforts are sitting in many spheres of the economy, in many corridors, but there's not one platform that enables this, to the point that Elvis then also said, was that we have an opportunity through such platforms, and I'm glad that you, Dawn, you've also committed to having such a space, is to pull together those particular stakeholders, those particular parties, and say, okay, if you are Agrisa Enterprises, if you are a bank, what is it that you are committing to doing in the next 3 years for the small guys or for the medium guys, depending on who the focus will be on. And I think that in itself will then move the needle very much so. Because I think we need to move away from this notion of being too reliant on the government, because that in itself creates its own inefficiencies. We need to look at alternatives and find solutions that are away from the reliance of government and our too much dependence in that regard.
Thanks, Kulani. Yolo, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to contribute or add to the specific point in the conversation?
In the new age of aquaponics, hydroponics, tunnel farming, and permaculture, I do think that we need to have a new age of thinking about funding. Yes, the government does say it will fund us, the youth, when we start these businesses, but it's really hard when it comes to the practicality of it. I think we kind of do need to look at other avenues when it comes to looking for funding. Companies have community commitments and they have programs that they run to make sure that they are engaged with the community. So I think those are options we should be looking at. And also, there's this thing called crowdfunding. It's mostly popular in the US. I think we should adopt such things because it's sort of an app where the donor meets the person in need. In this case, it will be the Agripreneurs, where we create a space where Agripreneurs advertise their business profiles, and then donors or investors, if I may say, would be, if they're interested in your business, then they would possibly fund you. So I do think we need to kind of rethink where we look for funding, and when it comes to the social media, and create networks. Do not shy away from getting those networks on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and make sure that you ask the right people where funding comes from.
Thanks, Yolo. I think that's definitely something that should not be overlooked. I connect people all the time because I meet so many amazing farmers and agriculturalists and economists. So I'm always connecting people. And I think we must definitely create another space where we just network. I think we've covered a lot of ground. We spoke about the technology earlier, about, young people being sort of instrumental when it comes to this new generation of youth in agriculture that's really advocating for the use of technology. And I think that's definitely where the future lies. So I don't think I want to talk much more about that, but I maybe want to focus on youth in agriculture and climate change specifically. What does it mean when we talk about farming for the future? What does it actually look like? Tabiso, do you want to maybe take this one?
You're bringing an interesting topic about the climate change, because Tabo can allude to this to say, especially in breeding of cattle, there's a lot of change in the seasons. It affects a lot of inputs, especially with regards to feeding and drought. I've seen young people becoming more innovative and bringing technology in. So, which is a good thing. I think that the space that we are in is fourth industrial revolution, and that's an opportunity on its own.
I think Tabiso might be having some trouble with his network, but I think the point he was trying to make is that we need to be adaptable, and we need to, obviously think about how we farm and how we practice and what does it actually look like and how it will change over time. Diana, do you maybe want to add to this point as well, just in terms of your work that you do within the agricultural sector? And then I'm going to maybe start wrapping up by asking all of our speakers to share one last final comment.
So farming for the future, climate change is one of the things which make job opportunities for plant scientists, because you get people doing research in crop which are resistant to droughts, frost, and hail. Most of the time when people think of climate change, they just think of the high temperatures, droughts, and all that. There's more to it. Is as we speak, that we're experiencing winter rainfalls in South Africa, which we hardly experience. So for farmers who farm onions, they usually farm around winter here in Bloemfontein and in some parts of the Northern Cape. And onion is not prone to rainfall. So the moment you experience rainfall when planting, it will destroy your crop. So that's where plant scientists come in, developing different varieties adapted to the changing environment. And also, like Henry mentioned, the main aim is yield. We breed for staff as plant breeders, plant pathologists. They do research based on the crop and yield. Yield is always the main outcome. All we're trying to do is make sure food security is a thing.
I just want to add something to what Diana said, as from a science point of view, is especially a plant breeder, just to think of it, the cultivars that are planted today has already been bred for 5 to 8 years ago. So as a plant breeder, a scientist, we already look to the future in everything we do, which is a very big concern for the human population, the changing environment. So from a science point of view, that's your way of thinking, and that's how we can better the world.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you so much, Diana. Then I'm going to ask all of my speakers just to share one last closing point. as we wrap up the conversation, I think there's a lot that we wanted to cover, and I think that there's so much more to unpack, specifically around youth in agriculture, some of the points that Elvis raised, and I think that we can definitely make room to engage on the various points in another space. But for now, just as a last, celebrating young people in the agricultural sector, I think I chose the title for a very specific reason, to say Halala young farmers, Halala young agripreneurs, the economists, the plant breeders, the agronomists, everyone that is in the sector. I think I just wanted to celebrate you. So maybe just keeping that in mind, to share one last comment for everyone who's listening. And Leah, I'm going to start with you.
I'm going to end my session just by saying that we need to think about the future. We need to think about future generations. We that are now in agriculture need to think about future generations and ensuring that we farm in a sustainable way to ensure that future generations, 50 years from now, and that they can be part of agriculture in South Africa. And I think it's important that we, as young people in agriculture, inspire others and be there for each other and motivating each other. And I'm very, very excited to see more and more young people coming into agriculture. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Annalie, and everything of the best with your farming journey and your work in the agricultural sector. Yolo, would you like to take the floor?
I would like to say, let us debunk the notion of thinking that agriculture is only for the poor and for the rich. The youth is needed in the agricultural space. There's a lot of research and development that needs to happen, and there are a lot of agripreneurs that need to take charge, and so that we can better the state of our country when it comes to food security. And we need to have an out-of-the-box thinking when it comes to thinking about being agripreneurs. Let's think of the high-value crops. Let's think of the niche markets. Let's exploit them as agriculturists. And the youth, we are the future of this country, and agronomists, agriculturists, and plant breeders, let's make sure to invest the skills necessary for us to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Yolo. Tabiso, can I give you the floor?
I'd like to say thank you for having me tonight. To other speakers, I just want to give you words of encouragement to say, remember that everybody eats food, and that is an opportunity on its own. So keep on plowing, keep on advising, keep on doing research, and keep on grinding. Together we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Tabiso. Kulani, would you like to take the floor?
I think it's a very exciting time that we're finding ourselves in. My word of encouragement is just for young people to do get into the sector. Earlier, when I started, said that the misconception has always been that the agricultural sector has always been the ugly duckling of sectors. But as we have seen in today's platform, that there's various areas that you can enter in, whether in the actual farming on the ground, whether you're going to be in research space, whether it's on the policy side, whether it's on the consultation part of it. There's a great opportunity that lies ahead. And the beautiful thing about the sector is that it's a very agile sector. It's a very resilient sector. So for the young person that is thinking, the young person who's starting out in the sector, just continue. And I think we need more and more young people to tailor the solutions for the sector and grow it from what it is currently to realize the full potential of the sector in going forward. So as a parting shot, I would also just echo the words of Don and say halala, the young agripreneurs halala.
Thank you so much, Kulani. Diana, your Lord.
In closing, agriculture is life. Learn as much as you can and enjoy it. I am here to learn more about livestock, but I am currently exploiting the plant side. As we speak, I have plants germinating in my DIY plastic bottle greenhouse outside. Thank you.
I love it. I think I can definitely take this plant scientist anyway. Henry, your last word.
I'm going to speak to the people that's sitting there today and you want to go into science or you want to go into any job or you're a bit lost right now. I'm going to give you some words and say, just do it. Gather the courage. You're not going to just sit there and do nothing. Put yourself out there. Make it happen. Don't wait for opportunity. Go get the opportunity.
Thanks, Henry. Tabo, you have the last word.
My last words are basically to inspire people that even though agriculture's dynamic is moving at quite an intense and high pace, we need to keep up with the time in order to stay afloat of the industry. So do those short courses, advance yourself and learn from other farmers, get a mentor and stay busy. I also want to mention what I said prior, that we need innovation, we need visionaries, and we need solutions. Agriculture is a key driver of our economic growth as it also contributes so much of our country's GDP. So there's definitely room for growth, room for improvement, and we need to plant the seed now in order for us to harvest it later. So farm on, go green or go home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thabo. And that brings us to the end of tonight's Gather to Grow. Thank you so much to my speakers. Thank you so much to the listeners as well, and to everyone who contributed. I really appreciate it. And have a lovely evening further. Halala, young Agripreneurs. Let's make this sector work for us and to feed the nation. Thank you so much. Bye for now.